Welcome, dear friends. Today we are going to hear a very delicate testimony. I ask you to reflect carefully before deciding if you wish to continue. If you feel this is not the right moment, I invite you to stop here. But if curiosity urges you to understand how evil can act in subtle, hidden ways, stay with me until the end. This is not simply a story, it is a disturbing testimony, one that may change your way of seeing the world. My name is Isabel. I was born into what most people would call a normal family, Catholic more by tradition than true conviction. Religion was present in our lives, but only superficially. We went to church on big occasions, baptisms, weddings, funerals. Faith was not lived out day by day. It was more a facade, something maintained to please society and relatives, rather than out of genuine devotion. But my uncle was different. He had a sharp, skeptical mind, and he constantly mocked religion. He never accepted things at face value, especially when they came from the church. I can still remember him leaning toward me during Christmas or Easter Mass, whispering sarcastic remarks. "Do you think God is listening to this nonsense?" he would say with a smirk. His sarcasm always made me laugh. To me it felt like a harmless game, a small rebellion against a system of rules that seemed to exist only to control. The rituals, the solemnity, the endless sermons, it all felt hollow to me. Over time, I began to imitate him. I mocked the church. I mocked Jesus. What use did I have for a God who preached sacrifice while the world was so full of injustice? Religion, in my eyes, was nothing more than another one of society's lies. Out of curiosity, I started reading books and joining online forums that criticized Christianity. At first, it was exploration. Later, it became a conviction. The arguments felt logical, appealing. Everything seemed so clear. Religion was nothing but a tool for manipulation, a way for the powerful to keep the masses under control. And I promised myself I would never be among the weak. I believed I had uncovered truth, that I was free from the chains of blind faith. One evening, my uncle called me. His tone was serious. "Isabel, I want to show you something tonight, but promise me you'll never tell anyone." I laughed. "What is it? Some secret experiment?" He didn't laugh back. "No. Something older, something the church fears. Just trust me." I had no idea that night would mark the beginning of a path I could not easily leave. When I entered his basement, I immediately noticed the difference. The room was swallowed in shadows, lit only by the flames of black candles placed in precise order. Strange symbols, carefully drawn on the floor, filled the atmosphere with something heavy, almost suffocating. My uncle told me it was just a game, a ritual, he called it. But don't take it seriously. It's only to provoke the church. Naive and curious, I agreed. He said all I needed to do was repeat some words, perform a few gestures, and it would be over. Nothing dangerous, he insisted. But that was the first door I opened without knowing how impossible it would be to close. It was the year 2010. Even today, the memory of that night is carved into me. What began as curiosity quickly became habit. Those rituals turned into part of my life, something I did with ease, almost pride. I thought it was rebellion. I thought it was power. But I see now I was walking straight into chains. Then came the night when everything changed. We were not in his basement this time. Instead, we went to an abandoned house, hidden deep in the countryside. The place looked lifeless, its walls cracked and stained, yet inside, the air felt charged with something heavy and ancient. There were more participants than usual, many of them strangers. Their faces were hard, their eyes fixed, as though they knew more than I did. Silence filled the room, broken only by low murmurs of strange words. We lit our candles, and the ritual began as before, but the atmosphere was different. The air pulsed with a presence that made my skin crawl. As I spoke the memorized phrases, everything changed. Suddenly, I felt a brutal separation from my body. It was as if I had been torn from myself, sucked into a swirling tunnel of shadows. A force greater than anything I had ever known dragged me downward. Terror consumed me, terror beyond any nightmare. When the journey ended, I stood face to face with a figure unlike anything I had seen. It was not entirely human, not entirely beast. A fusion of shadow and twisted forms, wrapped in darkness, yet strangely familiar. Somehow I knew what it was. This was no stranger. This was a presence that had hovered at the edges of my life, unseen until now. It spoke without words, yet its voice thundered through me. The creature showed me visions, grotesque images of souls in torment, writhing endlessly, faces twisted by pain, mouths open in screams that never ended. Hope had been torn from them, leaving only despair. Then, in a moment that froze my soul, it revealed its identity. "I am of your blood," it said in a voice that was both icy and sorrowful. "I came to show you what awaits if you continue this path." Horrifying scenes unfolded, souls chained in darkness, their cries echoing through eternity. "I do not want you here," the voice added, trembling with regret. "I am already condemned, but you still have a chance. You still have time." It was a warning, unmistakable and final, but I was stubborn. A part of me still clung to doubt. Fear crushed me, but pride whispered, "Don't believe this. It's only in your mind." The demon sensed my resistance and did not stop. It forced me to another vision, one that struck me harder than anything before. I saw a long procession of men and women. They were dressed in white robes, holding Bibles firmly, crosses shining on their chests. At first they looked like saints, like devout Christians walking the narrow road. But the demon's voice broke through my thoughts. "Not everything is as it seems," it said darkly. "Many of them are destined for hell, not because they never believed, but because their hearts never truly changed. Their faith is lukewarm, and lukewarm faith is worse than none at all." Then the veil was lifted, and I saw what lay beneath. Their outer holiness was only a disguise. Behind the masks of prayer and devotion lay corruption, arrogance, greed, lust, envy. They had spoken of Christ, but their lives had denied him. The demon peeled back the layers of their soul, exposing the hypocrisy hidden beneath their virtuous facade. It showed me how many of those who claimed to follow Christ still live steeped in sin. Their outward devotion was nothing more than a mask for inner corruption. Some stood boldly in the pulpit, preaching words of love and justice, while their hearts were secretly filled with resentment, jealousy, and greed. Others appeared at church every Sunday, wearing their finest clothes and showing piety before others. But once Monday came, they were swallowed by the world, losing themselves in its noise, chasing after wealth, gossip, and fleeting pleasures. The essence of faith never crossed their minds for the rest of the week. They were like actors in a carefully rehearsed play, wearing the costume of holiness but hiding the rot and decay of their souls. Under this revelation, I felt as if a hammer had struck me square in the chest. Hypocrisy in religious people had always troubled me, but seeing it laid bare in such brutal clarity shook me to the core. To realize that even those who looked the purest might face eternal damnation left me trembling in horror. The demon's voice slithered into my thoughts, cutting through my silence. "Praying alone is not enough," it hissed. "Walking into a church is not enough. Sin is a disease of the soul, and many refuse to seek its cure. Their mouths speak of faith, but their actions expose the truth. They do not possess the purity that God requires." The weight of these words pressed upon me like iron chains. For the first time, I saw not only the danger of others' hypocrisy, but also the reflection of my own heart. I was not far from the very same condemnation, but the demon was not finished. It revealed something even more disturbing. The vision shifted, and suddenly I stood inside a massive stadium. A sea of people surrounded me, filling every seat, their voices rising like thunder. Thousands of fans shouted with passion, cheers, screams, curses, and cries of victory or despair, all for a simple soccer match. Yet the air was thick with something sinister. A dark vibration spread through the crowd, twisting joy into frenzy, excitement into violence. The demon sneered mockingly. "Football is a tool of Satan," it declared. "Look at the world's obsession. It consumes hearts, fuels hatred, divides nations, and keeps people from God." As I listened, I felt the weight of its words. The lowest human emotions, anger, violence, rivalry, were stirred up and amplified here, feeding something unseen. At first, I struggled to understand. How could a sport so beloved, so seemingly innocent, be corrupted in such a way? The demon, almost amused by my confusion, continued. "Sports themselves are not evil," it admitted, "but Satan twists them, using them as distractions. He fills them with greed, pride, and obsession, turning people's eyes from compassion to rivalry, from peace to chaos. The vision shifted to other arenas: American football, basketball, even the Olympics. The same energy pulsed through each. Fans fought in the stands, blood spilled over meaningless rivalries, and players sacrificed health, morality, even their souls for a fleeting moment of fame. Behind every game, the demon whispered, lies ambition, vanity, and lust for glory. These things stain the heart of man. Before I could speak, the scene transformed again. I was suddenly in the middle of a concert. Blinding lights flashed across the stage, and thousands of people screamed, their voices rising in waves as music thundered from enormous speakers. The crowd moved as one, captivated by the rhythm. People cried, laughed, shouted, completely consumed by the moment. The demon's voice turned sharp with disdain. Look at these musicians, pawns of darkness. Many have traded their souls for fame, selling their bodies and minds to become instruments of sin. It gestured toward the stage, where singers and dancers stirred the crowd into frenzy. Their fortune does not come from talent or luck. Their souls are stained, bound to despair. They have bargained with demons for power, and drugs, vanity, and brokenness will drag them to the same pit. Every week, more of them arrive here. As I watched, I understood. Every note, every song, every performance was designed to draw people away from God, wrapping hearts in chains of lust, envy, and idolatry. What I had once considered harmless entertainment revealed itself as a trap, a carefully disguised diversion from eternal truth. A deep unease rooted itself in me, tightening its grip with every revelation. The things I had once cherished, the games, the songs, the gatherings, now looked poisoned, twisted into tools of deception. Then came an even darker vision. I stood in the shadows of a place that seemed endless, a realm filled with cries that shook the very air. There I saw a young boy, no older than 12, huddled in a corner, his small body trembling. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he stretched his arms desperately into the void, searching for a comfort that would never come. My voice shook. Why is he here? The demon answered coldly, without hesitation. He filled his mind with endless cartoons of violence, superheroes, and monsters. His parents never taught him the truth of faith. They left him defenseless, and he was taken. The words struck me like a physical blow. My heart broke as I looked upon his innocent face, condemned not because of willful rebellion, but because no one had guided him toward the light. How can this be? I cried. He was just a child, but the demon's tone remained unyielding. Parents carry a sacred duty. If they fail to teach their children, they too share in the condemnation. The weight of that truth crushed me. I thought of the countless parents who had chosen comfort, careers, or indifference over the spiritual care of their children. I saw how their negligence had opened the door for darkness to take root in their homes. This revelation tore through me like fire. It was not only the child who was lost, but his parents too, pulled into damnation by their refusal to nurture his soul. I trembled, realizing how many lives hung on fragile choices, how eternal destinies could be shaped by something as simple as neglect. The vision shifted once more, plunging me into an endless stream of scenes. I saw families torn apart, hearts enslaved by hidden lusts, men and women who spoke of Christ yet lived as strangers to him. And then I saw the final vision that froze my spirit in horror. I found myself witnessing a series of troubling scenes: unmarried couples locked in passionate embraces, divorces occurring without cause, and individuals living openly in sin. The demon condemned every form of sexual activity forbidden by the Bible. Its words were not vague warnings but sharp declarations, articulated with such frightening clarity that they felt carved into my very being. It left no space for excuses or self-deception. Every unatoned transgression, it said, would lead without fail to the gates of hell. The sound of its voice seemed to echo endlessly, lingering in the air like a heavy cloud that threatened to suffocate me. There was no warmth in its tone, no trace of compassion, only the chilling weight of judgment. Then I was thrust into the most shocking vision of all. The demon transported me into a realm of indescribable suffering, a vast expanse where the ground cracked with fire and the atmosphere pulsed with despair. The cries of the condemned rose like a chorus of anguish, a never-ending lament that shook me to my core. At the very heart of this dreadful place stood three figures. They were men draped in papal garments, yet their holy robes offered them no shield. Flames twisted upward, coiling around their bodies like serpents, consuming them slowly and deliberately. Their faces contorted in endless pain, and their screams pierced the heavy air with unbearable intensity. "These are popes," the demon declared, its voice laced with triumph and cruelty. Even they, like countless others who carried the name of Christian, fell into the trap of false worship. No Catholic who placed devotion in these men will enter paradise. Their veneration was directed toward flesh, not toward God, and so they now reap the consequences of their choices. I froze, my thoughts spiraling in disbelief. These popes had always been upheld as examples of holiness, paragons of unwavering faith and moral strength. How could this be? With trembling lips I whispered, "But were they not men of God?" The demon shook its head slowly, eyes glinting with dark amusement. "Every soul faces a choice," it said. "There is the easy path, dressed in pleasures, power, and compromise. And there is the hard path, demanding purity, sacrifice, and obedience to God's commands. Many claim the hard path, but in truth they walk the easy one, deceived by their own pride." The words pierced me deeper than a blade. I realized that no one, not even those in the highest offices, was immune to corruption. The revelation was devastating. The demon's voice grew heavier, resonating like thunder. "In 30 years, everything will change," it warned. "Most churches will be corrupted, and every soul will be forced to decide how to live. Remember, this history repeats itself. Humanity always moves in cycles." Its tone shifted, becoming strangely prophetic. In the darkest hours of mankind, Jesus descended to redeem those who repented, and when the time comes again, he will act the same way. But only those who are sincere will find his mercy. The vision imprinted itself on me like fire, refusing to fade even as the images dissolved into shadow. When I awoke, I was lying on the cold, hard floor of the abandoned house. My body convulsed with violent spasms, every muscle screaming in agony. I could not control my limbs. My mouth foamed, my eyes locked open, staring into darkness so thick it seemed alive. The flickering candles distorted before me, stretching into grotesque shapes that danced mockingly in my vision. The shadows crawled along the walls like sinister figures, feeding my terror. Not one of my companions moved to help. Their faces were drained of color, expressionless, as though their souls had already departed. At the center stood my uncle, his gaze fixed and unwavering. His lips moved ceaselessly, chanting in low, rhythmic murmurs. The incantations were cold and hypnotic, seeping into my bones. "We cannot stop the ritual," one of them whispered. The voice was flat, void of emotion, like a machine repeating instructions. They all stood motionless, watching as if my agony were merely another stage of the rite. Their silence was more terrifying than the words of the demon, for it showed me that I had become nothing more than a pawn. To them, my suffering had no meaning beyond its role in their dark ceremony. At that moment, I understood the harshest truth of all. Even family bonds had been twisted into something grotesque. Blood no longer meant protection. It had been turned into a weapon, binding me to their evil. The weight of that realization pressed down on me until I could hardly breathe. I felt utterly alone, drowning in despair, abandoned by those I once trusted. Minutes felt like hours. I thought my life was slipping away. Darkness crept over me, consuming my thoughts and numbing my body. Each breath was a battle, each second an eternity. I felt as though my soul was already being dragged into the abyss. Then, without warning, the convulsions ceased. It was as if unseen hands had broken the chains holding me down. I gasped for air, forcing myself to rise, though my body still trembled violently. My heart pounded like a drum, urging me to move. Escape was the only thought in my mind. I staggered forward, stumbling out of the house. The night air struck my face sharply, but it brought no relief. Every step felt like dragging myself through mud, as though the shadows still clung to me, refusing to let me go. Desperate, I called out for help. My voice cracked, thin and broken, but it was all I had. At last I reached the hospital. Doctors and nurses rushed to me, their faces etched with concern. They treated the burns on my hands, marks left by the ritual candles. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the unbearable heaviness pressing on my soul. As I lay on the hospital bed, staring at the sterile ceiling, clarity pierced through the fog of fear. Everything I had once believed, every choice I had made, had been built on deception. I had been manipulated, used as a tool by forces I barely understood. The demon I had seen that night was no savior. It was not a guide. It was a being of utter darkness, a creature bound to eternal torment. Perhaps in some distorted way, it had tried to warn me, maybe even out of desperation for the one fragment of family it still recognized. But the truth was undeniable. Evil cannot redeem. A condemned spirit cannot offer salvation. Its words might have carried warnings, but they came from desperation, not truth. I closed my eyes and reflected. The memories of the flames, the screams, the visions of corruption, they were etched into me forever. I could no longer live in ignorance. That night marked a new beginning, though one filled with fear and uncertainty. I finally understood the depth of my responsibility, the weight of my decisions. From then on, I knew the path before me would be long and demanding, a path that would require not only awareness, but also a commitment to seek the true light in a world riddled with shadows. My companions, those who had so easily abandoned me to death, were nothing more than slaves to the dark forces that consumed them little by little, day after day. They were desperately lost, caught in a relentless cycle of servitude, a chain that dragged them further away from the light with every passing moment. Their faces, once familiar, had grown hollow, their eyes vacant, their laughter empty. It was as if their humanity had been drained drop by drop until nothing remained but shadows. And then there was my uncle. For years I had admired him, blindly following his lead, believing him to be bold and courageous, a man who dared to stand against the world. But the truth revealed itself with merciless clarity. He was not the rebellious leader I had imagined. He was a puppet in a game far larger and far more sinister than I had ever dreamed. Strings of darkness bound him, unseen yet powerful, tugging at his will and driving him deeper into corruption. He had become entangled in evil so profoundly that he no longer even recognized how much of his soul had been consumed. As I lay in the hospital, clarity washed over me like a purifying tide. It was not a simple thought or passing realization. It was a revelation, an undeniable truth that pierced my soul like a sudden ray of light breaking through years of suffocating darkness. The path ahead was laid bare before me. Every choice I had made, every reckless step, had been a grave mistake, leading me toward the abyss from which I had been miraculously pulled back. This revelation was more than fear. It was awakening. For the first time, I understood what truth meant, not as an idea, but as a living force that demanded transformation. I knew that my life could never be the same again. The convulsions I had suffered, the memory of my companions watching me die without the slightest concern, and the cold indifference of my uncle, all of these became signs carved into my soul. They were not random events, but a striking illustration of the cruelty of a world where souls were traded as though they were worthless coins. That brutal abandonment shocked me awake. It made me realize how far I had wandered from what was pure, from what was just, from what was true. It was no longer about escaping evil. It was about finding and embracing genuine faith, the very faith I had mocked and scorned for so many years. And so, with trembling yet determined steps, I made my choice. I would follow Jesus. I recognized now that his way was the only way, the narrow path that could save me from the abyss I had nearly entered. Driven by conviction, I sought out the pastor of the local church. My heart pounded as I prepared to confess everything: the visions, the horrors, the fears that had crushed me, and the countless mistakes I had made. He welcomed me with calm and patience. He did not interrupt or dismiss me. His eyes, filled not with judgment but with compassion, seemed to carry a weight of understanding. It was as though he had already known the depth of my fall and the anguish I had endured. His silence spoke louder than words, giving me the courage to continue. There, in that sacred space, something extraordinary happened. As I poured out my heart, the burden I had carried for years began to lift. The chains of my past loosened, and a quiet peace filled me. For the first time, I believed that redemption was not a distant dream, but something within my grasp. My heart overflowed with hope as I took the first trembling steps on a path illuminated not by deceit but by grace. I placed deep trust in Father Pepe, the parish priest of my town. After listening carefully to my account, he spoke with solemnity. Isabel, what you carry is not yours alone. It is too heavy for one man, too deep to be contained. It must be shared with others who are prepared to understand. His words frightened me, yet they also reassured me. It was not rejection, it was acknowledgement of the weight of truth I bore. Soon after, I was sent to spend a full month in a convent. It cost nothing, yet it gave me everything. There, I lived among pastors and future pastors, men and women devoting themselves to study and prayer. That month became the most peaceful time of my life. The quiet routines, the hymns rising in the early morning, the gentle rhythm of prayer, all of it healed me in ways I did not expect. My heart, once hardened, began to soften. My faith, once ridiculed, blossomed into something living and real. Motivated by this renewal, I accepted the invitation to a private assembly where more than 100 pastors had gathered. The air in that hall felt heavy with significance, as though heaven itself was watching. With trembling hands and a voice that wavered, I stood and shared my testimony. I recounted the visions that had terrified me, the grotesque warnings, the deceptions hidden behind innocent facades, and the way evil dressed itself in disguise to lead souls astray. The pastors listened with deep concentration, their faces grave. When I finished, they spoke softly but firmly, advising me to guard my words and keep them within trusted circles. They feared the world would not understand, and that my story might bring ridicule or worse. I obeyed for a time, but now, after more than 15 years, I can no longer keep silent. The truth must be shared. The urgency is too great. Some experiences etch themselves so deeply into your being that silence becomes impossible. Mine was such an experience. I have seen how evil slithers into lives, cloaked in promises of pleasure, of freedom, of power. I can say with absolute certainty that only God saves, and only Christ provides the way to salvation. I implore you, cast away the vices that enslave you. Do not waste your life on fleeting pleasures that bind you in chains. Follow the scriptures with devotion. Choose the narrow road. Only then can you be assured of eternal life. Do not fall into the traps that caught me. Do not allow the enemy to twist your heart as he twisted mine. The final vision I received remains etched into me. It is a fire that burns constantly, reminding me every day of the war we are living in, the spiritual battle raging unseen around us. I share this not to frighten but to awaken. We must open our eyes before it is too late. In our darkest hours, when the night seems endless, Jesus comes. He came for me. He will come for you. I am convinced that we are now living in one of the darkest chapters of history. The signs are all around us. That is why we must prepare. Forgive your enemies. Let go of sin's heavy chains. The time is short. The world is sinking deeper into chaos, and the moment of redemption approaches. I believe with all my heart that it will arrive sooner than we think. Do not wait until it is too late. God is calling now. Answer his call before the shadows consume you forever. I thank you sincerely for listening to my testimony all the way to the end. If my story has stirred something within you, if it has spoken even a little to your heart, I encourage you share it with 3 Christian friends. Let them also hear and reflect. Leave a comment with amen to testify of your faith, and join us in spreading this crucial message.